So Greenland's actually the part of North America that's been in conflict with Europe for like the longest, right? And the Vikings came over at about 1000 current era and show up and start doing Viking things. And the story that we've always heard is that like they showed up and they tried to farm, and then eventually things got colder and they kind of stood their ground farming and disappeared. My understanding is that that's actually kind of like being walked back now, right? They didn't really understand what they were doing when they created that narrative, and that's, valid. Things change. But it turns out that those Viking crews that were the first Greenland folks coming over from Europe probably were doing a ton of walrus ivory trading. That walrus tusk was this very rare, expensive thing. And that Greenland was the site that the Vikings were setting up and living at, and then popping up and getting all these walrus tusks during the summer during these little hunting expeditions. It also makes sense because it explains this other factor. So we knew that the Vikings were impacted. There was this volcano that happened on the other side of the world, but a huge volcano that makes everything colder. And when that happens, they have a harder time farming. But the other piece that like is the economic piece is that those walrus tusks became worthless because people were suddenly starting to bring in more elephant tusk. And as more elephant tusk hit the European markets, walrus tusk was less rare and therefore less expensive. And so it just didn't price point support the Vikings doing this thing that they were doing. Plus, the Black Plague had hit, and so like a bunch of Europe had just kind of ceased to exist. It didn't actually hit the Vikings. There's no evidence that like the plague hit the Viking encampment. But what it did is it changed the economics because they were relying on those walrus tusks having a market. And when half their market disappears, suddenly things don't go so well for the Vikings, and they probably just pick up encampment.